As our history books tell us, the British Army of today owes much to the Roman Army of yesterday. Their soldiers formed a highly skilled professional force, feared by all those who came into conflict. They were an elite fighting machine, well equipped, of high morale, showing always a deep sense of comradeship. Indeed, a proud body of men, allowing and developing close and sincere associations in their legions while serving and afterwards. And we are the same. I would like to take a few minutes of your time to talk about the role and function of the Army Catering Corps Association and how we value your personal contribution through the Days Pay a Year scheme, and under the terms of benevolence, the important part we all play in looking after those perhaps less fortunate than ourselves. We sustain, of which you are part, a highly efficient modern army, respected for our character and military skills by all other foreign powers throughout the world. Of course, the army is much smaller than when we were formed in 1941. Since then, the record proudly relates that we have played our part with distinction in all major war theatres and military campaigns. They include World War II, Malaya, Korea, Cyprus, Borneo, Belize and Northern Ireland, and more recently the Falklands War, as depicted here in Terence Cuneo's painting A Lull in the Battle, which was commissioned by our Corps officers in 1984. This outstanding painting shows the many roles played by our soldiers in an operational theatre in a poignant and dramatic way, a scene which, in reality, can only and truly be appreciated by soldiers, and which is quietly observed by Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Kent. The Corps family spirit begins here at St. Omer Barracks. All soldiers share the experience of basic training and the passing out parade. It is a team effort. This is where we learn to share and help one another. Indeed, the place where we make friends for life, and most important, we learn to look after our own. Among the important offices of Corps management, the Director Army Catering Corps has the Corps Secretariat, situated in the heart of the training centre. Working on our behalf, the many wide-ranging tasks and responsibilities are carried out on a daily basis by a small staff of 4, consisting the Corps Secretary, the Corps Treasurer, both of whom are retired officers, and 2 civil service administrative officers. 2 of the most demanding tasks performed by the Corps Secretary and his team are the management of the business of the ACC Association and the management of Corps benevolence. You are probably aware that all corps and regiments have associations, which are run centrally like our own, representing past and present members of the Corps in branches situated wherever our soldiers serve, in military theatres worldwide. And what does our association do? Our Corps Secretary now broadly defines the objects.
Now, according to the Constitution, as it lays down, we promote the efficiency of the British Army by firstly enabling members, particularly ex-members of the Corps, to keep in touch with each other. Secondly, to foster a esprit de corps, comradeship, and the welfare of the Army Catering Corps, preserving its traditions. Thirdly, we encourage recruiting. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, we assist those members, past and present, their wives, the widows, the children and dependents who are in sickness or in need.
Relating to the objects, I wish to simply explain now the prime tasks of the 4 members of the Secretariat, and then describe the organisation and management structure so that you can appreciate how the Association goes about its business on our behalf. The Secretary manages the Secretariat, including the ACC Association, on behalf of the Director, and works directly to the Commandant of the ACC Training Centre on matters of corps benevolence. With his many duties and responsibilities, he is, quite naturally, the communication link between the central agency and individual branch members wherever they may be. The main organs of communications are the Association Newslink, which normally appears 4 times a year, and the annual copy of the Corps House Journal, Sustainer. As a contributor to the Days Pay a Year scheme, you are entitled to a free copy of Sustainer. All members are reminded to complete their address labels each year to obtain their copy. Many fail to do this, and as a result they miss out. And of course, it is the Corps Secretary who is involved with you personally, as it is he who carries out the administration and documentation in respect of your annual and covenanted donation to the Association. I refer to the Days Pay scheme. He provides advice for members such as matters involving solicitors, building societies and other professional bodies. He organises and operates the Corps Resettlement and Employment Bureau for those leaving the service, and most especially plays a significant role with past members and arranges visits to members in homes and hospitals who are sick, infirm, or perhaps to those who require assistance in solving worrying problems. The Corps Treasurer manages the day-to-day administration of all association finances. He deals with membership, deeds of covenant, and donations to the Benevolent Fund, makes submissions to the Board of Governors and the CEC, controls all purchases and sales, assists the Corps Secretary and acts for him during his absence. He coordinates matters relating to the ACC Memorial Hall and is curator of the ACC Museum. And he organises with the Corps Secretary fundraising activities, including lotteries. Turning attention to the 2 administrative officers, one is responsible for accounts, the shop with an annual turnover in excess of £20,000, membership, and the mundane yet onerous task of dealing with the distribution of labels, preparing envelopes, and cash orders for our house journal. The other is responsible for secretarial support for benevolence, all matters of welfare, all aspects of aftercare, and looking after office supplies. Now I intend to describe the organisation and begin with association branches which exist in military commands out on the ground and conclude with the Board of Governors. As you would expect, at each level, the local organisation is managed by a committee. Each one will comprise a chairman, a vice-chairman, an honorary secretary, an honorary treasurer, and 3 other members. The committee is required, under the Constitution and rules, to meet quarterly and hold at the appropriate time their annual general meeting. Statements of accounts for the preceding year are required to be sent to the Corps Secretary in the centre at Aldershot by the 31st of January each year. Fortunately, our association is not all work, committees and financial accounts. On the contrary, each year sees its round of social events and a good time is had by all. Parties and activities are organised by the local committees purely to have fun as a Corps family. Also, and in particular, there are numerous occasions for sports and games, both in the Corps and at regimental level, and most of these events are assisted by cash grants in aid. In the true spirit of comradeship, it is up to each branch to extend its activity beyond regular Corps members, to encourage local ACC volunteers, WRAC permanently employed with us, and civilian staff. And most important of all, ex-members of the Corps to join in the fun and make their personal contribution. All this adds up to a sense of belonging. We now come to the Central Executive Council, which I will refer to in its shortened title as the CEC. The CEC consists of a chairman, who is by appointment our director, a vice chairman, who is the Colonel of Headquarters Director, Army Catering Corps, and elected by you, 4 serving members made up of 2 officers and 2 soldiers, 6 non-serving members, 1 of whom is TA, and the chairman of the Branch Chairman's Conference. It is the CEC which administers and manages the association. As members, I strongly advise you to read and understand the Constitution and rules. As a most important part of annual business, Corps units, association branches, sports and games committees, and individual members who plan to be involved in adventurous pursuits may bid for financial support. This is referred to as grants in aid. A small committee is formed to assess all bids and forwards to the CEC a list showing sums of money involved. It is the CEC, on your behalf, who agrees or otherwise the individual bids and authorizes the release of monies. At the end of each year, business ends with the annual general meeting, which takes place in St. Omer Barracks. Apart from routine business, this meeting confirms the financial state, and the Corps at large hears 2 most important reports. One from our director giving the chairman's report on the conduct of the CEC, and the report on benevolence given by the commandant of the ACC Training Centre, who is the chairman of benevolence. We now come to the principal management committee, namely the Board of Governors, who control the direction and general policy of our association. Our representative Colonel Commandant is the President, and the Board has as its members the present Colonel Commandant, who acts as Deputy Chairman, and former Colonels Commandant Army Catering Corps. Our Director, the Chairman of Corps Benevolence, the Vice Chairman of the CEC, and the Senior Regimental Sergeant Major. Additionally, a Vice President of our association may be appointed to serve as a member. The Board of Governors, this most influential body, which we leave in good humour, meets not less than once each year. And all the time, we do not forget those who no longer serve, but remain forever members. Initially, I refer to 2 bodies which exist in parallel with our association, and are closely allied, and in which you may become a future member. First, our Corps officers have their own long-established past and present organisation, who meet regularly. And second, our warrant officers and sergeants similarly have their own association. The Royal Hospital Chelsea, famous throughout the world and distinguished by some 400 to 500 in-pensioners with our colourful red dress, is home to a far-ranging cavalcade of military campaign history, as some in-pensioners are in their late 50s and others in their late 90s. Currently, our Corps has 9 in-pensioners who we see at the rehearsal for Oak Apple Day, the day for the annual review. They are joined by ex-Corps members, 2 of whom were regimental sergeant majors, who now hold important posts on the permanent staff. There are many homes throughout the United Kingdom which look after ex-Corps soldiers who are sick or infirm. Perhaps the most well-known of these is the Royal Star and Garter Home for disabled sailors, soldiers and airmen. In a caring regimental society, it is marvellous to see how our soldiers are looked after, especially when many are severely disabled as the result of their service, usually from dreadful wounds following combat. Our Corps plays its part. The importance placed by us all on the Star and Garter is reflected in our presence, namely a past director is a member of the Board of Governors, our current director is the Force's Honorary Catering Advisor, and a retired officer is the Catering Officer. Closer to home, and to mark those who have died or lost their lives in conflict, we have the ACC Memorial Hall. It supports a variety of occasions, study periods, conferences, and social events, including an income from hiring out. We all know this building well. It was financed, constructed, and is maintained by our own Corps monies. This highly regarded, still modern building, with its integral chapel, is used by us today, remaining a sincere and dedicated monument, saluting those who made the supreme sacrifice. And so, we demonstrate the requirements for modern management, dealing with the problems of now, but continuously looking back over our shoulders to what has gone before. As we train for war, we continue to care for the welfare of our fellow man. History doesn't repeat itself, but events are similar. Here we see a Roman platoon exercising in hostile country, as today they could be on Dartmoor, Salisbury Plain, or the Stanford training area. Close by, they see an old comrade from the Legion, long since retired. As soldiers were forbidden marriage while serving, ex-soldiers often had young families. Here we see a widower with his 2 young children. True to form, the men reminisce, and old friendships permit the gift of money before it's time to go. Today, we do not openly and blatantly pass money by hand. What we now know is that we have an efficient system for dealing with problems and an organization which carefully considers to provide sustenance where it is needed. This we refer to as benevolence. I make special emphasis as benevolence is perhaps the prime task, and very little would be achieved if you and I did not give our full support. This documentary is primarily designed to show how the Corps Secretariat manages our money. In order to appreciate what happens today, let us look back in history. Governments have not always looked after soldiers and their families in need. Out of mind, many soldiers served and died abroad. Life expectancy after full service was usually short, due to severe lifestyles as emphasized here by their training. However, from its very foundation, the Roman administration recognized, in some measure, its responsibility for making financial provision for its veterans. A simple course was adopted. Soldiers were settled on retirement at first in colonies, like Colchester, and given land. Later, land was replaced by money. These measures were fundamental in that at last, provision for legionaries on retirement was settled on a fixed basis, as a right and not as a privilege. We move on in time. Other leaders improved the lot of soldiers and their dependents. Oliver Cromwell was most notable. In the year following the beginning of the Civil War in 1642, he ensured that Parliament passed an ordinance ordering every parish to levy a rate for its disabled soldiers and for widows and orphans of those who had fallen on the field of battle. As we see here, the Society of the Sealed Knot reenacting one of their many battles of the Civil War. Cromwell and later Charles II allowed ex-soldiers to practice trades and handicrafts, provided that the individuals were willing to take oaths of allegiance and supremacy. Indeed, Cromwell deserves the credit for being the first English ruler who attempted to find employment for old soldiers. In 1651, widows of some officers and soldiers killed at the Battle of Worcester were voted compensation sums, and other sufferers obtained admission to almshouses and similar institutions. And what of today? Every Thursday, the committee meets in St. Omer Barracks. It has executive powers to give grants within the terms of the fund. This vital work is carried out by a small committee of 5 persons, which has a carefully balanced and appointed membership, namely, the chairman, who is the commandant of the ACC Training Centre, 1 serving officer, 1 serving soldier, and 2 retired officers. For a moment, let us follow the simple steps in a typical but fictitious case. First, the Corps Secretary informs of a problem from any source, indeed which could originate from one of our branches. The Corps Secretary requires more details in order that the Benevolence Committee can decide what has to be done. Third, SAFA is asked to visit the family who have the problem, and a report is submitted to the Corps Secretary. And fourth, details are put before the next benevolence meeting and a decision to help is made. With our affluent society, the situation is much improved with pension schemes, gratuities, and social security. However, it is declared policy that charitable organisations should play a greater part in supporting the needy. But there is a stark fact of life to remember. In our regimental society, the army gets smaller as the ever larger and ageing population remains a constant concern. Let me put the Corps position into perspective. In choosing statistics, I used benevolence details for 1989. The matter of benevolence is still perhaps one of those aspects of life that many of us gloss over, particularly when one is young and healthy. However, I cannot stress enough the continuing need to support the Corps through the Days Pay scheme and, where appropriate, voluntary donations. And finally, let us look at two case histories. The best information is always close at hand. In fact, the annual benevolence report is contained in the spring edition of Newslink. Perhaps the most significant Corps Family Day is the last day of Corps Week each year, Corps Sunday. This special day, celebrated by all denominations in their various churches, is portrayed here at the Royal Garrison Church of All Saints at Aldershot. It is a very important rendezvous, an occasion permitting the meeting of old friends who may only meet on this day each year. Before the service begins, we see the congregation meeting outside the church and then mixing as a Corps family group of all ages and all ranks, joining together those of the past and those of today. Seasoned soldiers, recruits, apprentice chefs, and not forgetting our Women's Royal Army Corps, the many loyal civilians, and last, but by no means least, the Territorial Army, all who have played and continue to play such an essential role in the professional standing and development of our Corps. Once inside the church, the congregation settle down for the service. The choir enters, and as the first hymn is sung, the Corps banners are arranged at the altar. The lesson is read by the representative Colonel Commandant. A most poignant part of the service each year is when our chaplain reads the names at random from the Corps Book of Remembrance. With a name, a memory is relived. Names go back to the birthday of our Corps in 1941 and continue its proud nominal role to the present day, including, as we see here, those who gave their lives during the Falklands War.
Private Llewellyn Owen. Private Boston O'Malley.
This annual service once again draws to a close. Preparations take place for the march past. The old comrades who lead the parade join the serving members. The parade marches past to the stirring tones of the Corps march, Sugar and Spice. The representative Colonel Commandant takes the salute. Following the parade, the majority of those attending return to St. Omer Field for a drink and to continue the conversations and reminiscences prior to lunch. Behind the representative Colonel Commandant, there are scenes of affection. there are opportunities for the most senior to talk with the most junior. There is the opportunity for families to relax and for the children to get away from their parents who seem to do nothing but talk about the old days. And so we remember. And another year draws to a close. Each November, along with other corps and regiments, we remember those who gave their lives for Queen, country, and the freedom of peoples. A small group of corps representatives, in company with Colonel's Commandant and our Director, meet in the Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey. This deeply moving and solemn occasion is shared with our royal family, and for many years now, pride of place has been taken by Her Majesty the Queen Mother. Individual poppies and small wooden crosses mark, as always, the sincere way in which we remember those who have fallen in battle and other military conflicts. And our story comes full circle. Modern progress and prosperity permit us to be more generous. Nevertheless, we know only too well that in a demanding and fast-changing world, there are many casualties. We must continue to give support where it is needed, and contributions and donations are more important today than ever before. The Roman army left our shores some 1600 years ago. The impact of their being here remains even to this day. As part of our heritage, many things are the same. Like those who have gone before us, we have learned to give comfort to those less fortunate than ourselves. We must continue to give our support through the pay schemes properly covenanted so that the best use is made of our money. As a new generation takes over, the trust bestowed upon them, they can, with confidence, acknowledge the salute from the soldiers of the past and carry on as comrades that sense of belonging and inherent goodwill on into the future.